Welcome to a new episode of Product Directions Podcast, 100 Product Strategies. We are your insider access to top product leaders shaping the strategy of the most diverse industries today. I'm your host, Nacho Basino, and I'll be digging into the real-life situations, problems, and frameworks used for strategy with product people all around the world in all kinds of products and markets. While there is no recipe for success, listening to others' experiences may give you the edge you need to solve your next strategic challenge. Hello everyone and welcome to a new episode. I'm here today with Alessandro Pintaudi and he is currently VP of Product at Amenitiz, a company in the travel sector. So always happy to hear stories from a company or an industry I can relate to, and I can maybe ask some more interesting questions than other industries that I'm not familiar with. But also he's coming from a long trajectory as a product leader in many different companies. So probably we can get something about your experience there as well. Alessandro, welcome to the program. Welcome to the show.
Thank you, Nacho, for inviting me, and very happy to be here with you.
Excellent. Since I only gave a few words about yourself, can you just take maybe the first moments to give a few more words about what you have been doing lately and what is Amenitiz?
Yeah, absolutely. So essentially in the past years, I covered different product leadership positions in different startups and scale-ups. I started initially in consulting, then, as I said, moving to startups, mostly in travel tech, and then moved to scale-ups. I was product director at Payfit, and then advised a few seed stage startups, and among which Amenitiz, which I ended up to be their VP product eventually 6 months ago. Here, essentially, what we do is we are building an all-in-one solution for independent hoteliers to make sure that they can manage their property operations, distribute their inventory online, and centralize all the finances. And we're doing that we're trying to do it in a very disruptive way and innovative way so that we can bring more value to our customer that traditionally travel tech companies were able to do.
Okay, excellent. Very interesting background. And I usually start getting into the weeds of the strategy by asking you exactly what was maybe the last strategy creation that you did, and maybe you can give us a few hints of what you did for Amenitiz, how the process looked like, what steps, what frameworks, what tools you may use, so we get a grasp of what you have been doing with the strategy at Amenitiz.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's a very interesting and very important topic, especially for this period of the year. We're getting at the end of the year, so there's lots of budgeting and discussion around what's going to be looking like next year. Where do I allocate the budget? Where do we bet on? How we can align the business towards what's the most impactful things for both the customers and our users. And so definitely strategic discussions at product but at company level are popping up on a weekly basis, and definitely recently we ran a few sessions as well with the team focusing more on the product strategy. And the way I like to think about the product strategy is essentially by making sure that we have a clear understanding of what's the vision and the mission of the company. Once the vision and the mission of the company is clear, then we can look at, on one side, mapping out the market landscapes and the competitor landscape to understand what's out there. And on the other side, understanding deeply our customer jobs and needs. I like to structure it in a way that is taking few principles from different frameworks that people, I guess, are familiar with. And so, the opportunity tree is very famous, but what I find a bit limitative is the fact that it's starting from one defined objective, and once you are developing a strategy, the objective is not clear by itself. Mm-hmm. And so, but the good thing of the opportunity tree is essentially to map out more options than what you potentially have available. And so having a full overview of which are all the possibilities that you have out there allows you to eventually prioritize properly the ones that you need to prioritize. And so essentially the work that we've been doing over the last weeks was essentially to understanding our customer jobs in details at different levels. And so essentially starting from why would a customer hire Amenitiz for? what's essentially the business job that needs to do. If we consider, for example, Slack mission, which is bringing all your communication together in one place, the customer job of a company hiring Slack could be, for example, communicating between departments.
Mm-hmm.
And then a different level is the user job, is actually who is using your product. And so why would you use the product for? And so, for example, you want to create multiple groups because you want to make sure that you create multiple conversation with multiple people. And so by making sure that on one side you map out in a very structured way your vision, your mission, and then you have multiple customer jobs that are essentially the reason why your customer will hire your product for. Mm-hmm. And you cascade that down to your user job. So essentially the user using the product for which you created a need for, in our case, receptionists, revenue managers are the one using the product, but the property owner is the one choosing the product. And so the customer job of the property owner might be different from the one of the property or of the receptionist. So we map out essentially this architecture in a very structured way, similarly to an opportunity tree, essentially using a hierarchical approach, but starting from the vision, starting from the mission, and cascading that down from the customer job to the user job up to the solution. We do that in a horizontal way as well. So we kind of map out all the customer jobs. Essentially, in order to do that, you need to have a good understanding, if you remember at the beginning, of the market landscape and the competitors. And you need to have a very good understanding of your customer jobs. Essentially, what does it mean to be an hotelier? But also, what does it mean to be a receptionist? What does it mean to be a revenue manager? Which are the tasks that they need to do every single day with amenities or without amenities? And once you map that out, you can essentially build the whole customer journey. Now, once you map out all the opportunities, you can start identifying which are all the pain points that are preventing them to achieve those jobs. And depending on the level of maturity or the level of importance of those opportunities and the level of blockers that those pain points are preventing their customer to achieve their job, as well as the impact on the company, we try to prioritize macro areas. In this way, we end up prioritizing streams, prioritizing a stream which could be a customer job, and eventually defining the objectives that can help both our customers to deliver value, but also our business to capture that value. Once we identify the macro area, so the macro customer jobs that we want to tackle, then we get down into discovery phase. And so we deep dive into the pains of the user jobs, and eventually we brainstorm and ideate on the solutions.
Very, very interesting and very complete, I would say. I'm wondering a few things there. So this clear vision, mission statement, is this something that, let's put it this way, you had available, or was part of your kind of setup exercise for the strategy, also helping the company come up with this vision, mission? And if so, because I see you nodding, how that looked like? I mean, what's the what exercise did you come up with to have this in place?
Yeah, well, that one very often should come, the vision and the company mission should mostly come from the very beginning of the early stage of the company, let's say.
Well, we know that might not be true.
If that doesn't happen, definitely an exercise needs to happen. In this case, what we did in previous exercises was essentially iterating on the existing vision, which was empowering all hoteliers in the world. And we kind of iterated on every single meaning of that to make sure that it was exactly what we were trying to achieve at Amenitiz. And so this is a completely different workshop where, you need to brainstorm on where you want to go, which is your targeted users, what's the segment you're trying to achieve, what's the geolocalization, and eventually how you potentially get there. That normally, to define the product strategy, should be given in order for the product strategy to be easier. Otherwise is where you diverge too much and you kind of go in every single direction. It's a bit like Slack. Knowing that Slack mission is bringing all your communication together in one single place, you know that developing communication tools is probably easier than developing other products for sales.
Yeah, I absolutely see that. The second question I had is kind of that's super clear. Now coming back to the second phase, let's put it away. Still, the mission and vision are super broad, and you mentioned an exercise of kind of mapping all these jobs. For example, the user jobs that you mentioned. I can imagine this Slack space having hundreds of user jobs out there. So, is this something that you do upfront? I mean, I can imagine this taking a lot of work upfront before defining the strategy on the first place. And the second place, this is something that you will, even though you try to plan it in advance, you will learn along the way, right? As you go, you will learn more. So how is this, the combination of the exercise being done upfront versus the constant updates, if you will, of these shops or opportunity space?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and especially strategy, I think, is not one exercise that you can do in one single day and then you forget about it. It should be something that you recurringly update based on new learnings, based on experiments, based on information from the market. And so for us, it was an opportunity to start mapping out all those opportunities. On one side, try to prioritize those opportunities. Very often in product, what we do is, we identify one opportunity, we pursue that, and maybe we forget about everything else we're discarding, which may be more important. And so by the simple fact that you have other opportunities, first, you can leave, you give yourself a chance to prioritize in the most rational way as possible, but also to open a conversation with someone else. It can be a conversation with the leadership team. It can be a conversation with the customer-facing teams. It can be a conversation with other teams that didn't participate to the discussion to understand whether people had different insights or different angles to your prioritization framework. And at the same time, you leave yourself the opportunity to have the framework already ready and keep iterating on that by adding new knowledge on that. And that's exactly what we're doing. And so once the framework is ready, for example, we will be using tools that we already started implementing, such as, Product Board. We implemented the very same structure in Product Board, where we have 3 different layers. We have the customer jobs, we have the user jobs, and we have the solutions. And we are connecting that with the different customer-facing tools. So whenever a sales executive or a customer care agent is discussing with a customer and is understanding there is a problem with the product or is understanding a need that is not being surfaced by our product, they can identify one of those opportunities, tag it, and add both the qualitative but also quantitative insights to that. Because the more qualitative insights are added to one of those layers, the more we know that the reach and potential the impact of that opportunity can have either on our prospects or on our existing customers.
That's super interesting. So, but that's also, and I mean, I'm trying to recap what you're saying to keep it in my head. So we have this initial exercise of trying to map the user experience of different jobs that map to our vision. Then I guess that in order for people, and what you are mentioning is people even outside the product space to contribute
Correct.
to this map, they need to know it and understand it. So is there an exercise of kind of, communicating not only the strategy, but also the underlying opportunity space to others?
That's correct. And at the end of the day, understanding the concept of job is something that everyone in the company knows, because at the end of the day, it's everyone's job understanding how our customer work in order to sell them something, identify their problems in what they're doing in order to eventually sell our product, better support them, and eventually provide them the right solution. Very often customers or customer-facing teams come up with a solution, and that's okay, as long as there is a clear link as well in what they're trying to achieve. And so if they give already a proposal for the eventual solution, the important thing is just not forget what is eventually trying to solve. And so if we just trace the full hierarchy of that, it will be allowing the teams to eventually try out different solutions, or eventually simply understand better why it was trying to achieve that and whether it exactly is the right way of doing that. But like you said, a prior work of understanding the model, understanding how it works, and eventually showing them that by tagging properly, sharing the insights, they can have an impact, a direct impact on the product roadmap is key, because otherwise it would be very complicated to get to the right level of excellence that we want to get to.
By the way, I'm curious on the because I mean, going back to my thinking is, this is a huge effort. So you say, hey, I'm mapping the entire customer experience, I'm mapping the entire shops from different levels, and I need to kind of communicate that to the entire company. How does that look like from a time frame perspective? So how long did you spend on that, and how do you manage that workload? I mean, especially for the product managers that may be in your team, that workload with the rest of the activities that they will probably be doing.
Yeah, essentially we're time box activities. So we sat together for one full day in order to first, gather all the knowledge that we had from different angles. And so we had different empathy map exercises where we mapped out all the different user jobs, their pains and their gains, with post-its, very simple exercise, but from different angles. And so you had the product manager focusing on one scope, a product manager focusing on the other one. We brought people from sales, we brought people from engineering, and so each of them had a different angle based on different conversation that they had with the customer, based on their understanding of the data, or based on understanding of different conversation. And so we mapped them out in one single day with our understanding of that day. And then afterwards, we essentially, each person was responsible for creating that hierarchy on the tools that we're using, and with the help of our ops team. So we have different ops, we have revenue ops, we have product ops that are helping us to create those processes at scale. They are the guardians, let's say, for creating the right tags, the right processes, the right integrations between the tools. We have as well product research that is helping us, not only helping the product teams, but also the customer-facing teams to run research at scale. And so essentially with that approach, we are able to gather the right level of insights and structure them in the right way, so that everyone in the organization at some point will have access to what we are doing, what we could be doing, and what we're thinking of.
That's super interesting. So I like the idea of, so you're combining this with the kind of cross product organization support with this product ops and other people helping. That's very smart.
Yeah, and yeah, very often the problem in the organization is that you have many people coming up with insights, with solution, and they don't have a means to influence the product roadmap. From the leadership to customer-facing teams, everyone has the same problem. And so if you provide them a system where everyone can play with that, depending on the insights you have, you're going to contribute to that, whether at customer jobs level, at mission level, or at solution level, then you gather just more insights than you usually can.
Yeah. And actually, you create the opportunity for co-creation, which will actually raise the level of understanding of why you are selecting certain things and the level of commitment to the strategy you are pursuing in product. So
that's correct. That's correct.
Makes a lot of sense.
And the people that are working on the solution will understand why they're working on the solution, because everything is connected with a higher mission. And so if we're working on a solution that is not connected with a mission, probably there's something wrong on that. So with the three concept, so with a hierarchy concept, you can actually map out at different levels the what and the why you're doing what you're doing.
Yeah, and that's another good, interesting topic I was going to ask. So you have this, you mentioned having the hierarchy of shops or opportunities. I mean, if you see it from the perspective of the tree, what's the level of granularity you aim for? Or maybe we can use an example. So maybe something that's super high level and how you break it down in different layers. Do you have an example in mind that we can kind of follow that pattern?
Yeah. I mean, I guess it depends on the organization. You can go very granular. I mean, you can go from, because essentially what you want to map out is the what and the why at every single level and go deep and deep. So you can start with the vision and the mission.
Mm-hmm.
You can go with the customer job. So why customers are ultimately hiring your product for, and mapping out as well all the problems related to that.
Yeah.
Then you can
And
go to another layer.
Maybe for that one, is this, we're talking about 3 shops that they hire the product for, or we are talking about, 20 shops, just to understand the level of granularity?
I guess in terms of depth,
Exactly.
I think it's much more around 20, 30 or even more.
Okay.
And
so just the first layer is already very kind of spread.
Yes.
Okay.
I think the more understanding on your customer and the more complex is the job of your customer and the more jobs you have, the more...
And your product will grow.
Exactly. And the more... It means also the more opportunity you have. It doesn't mean that you need to cover them all. Some of them you just say, I'm aware that this is one of the job of our customer. I'm going to outsource that. I'm going to create a partnership with that. If I see that it's very painful for my customer to run that, like an hotelier, for example, needs to run maintenance, and probably they need to manage their cost. Is it a priority of Amenitiz? Probably not today, but we are aware that they're managing their cost. And at some point, they will need to rely on some sort of automatization in order to make that as efficient as possible, which is ultimately their goal.
Yeah, got it.
And in terms of vertical granularity, you can go as down as to the feature level. Yeah.
Yeah, got it. Now that you mentioned one thing that you made it so simple, but I know that it's very often it's hard, is selecting these areas in which you invest. So at the end of the day, the strategy, now I hope you have a very comprehensive view of all the map of things that you can do, and then you need to select these areas that you mentioned. But I guess, what's the logic or the process or even the inputs to make that selection?
Yeah, that's a very good question, and that's probably the hardest one as well. But essentially, the fact that you have multiple opportunities, it means that you have multiple ways of impacting both the life of your customer and the life of your business, and choosing the correct one at the right moment is key. And so, how do we do it? Well, essentially, first is about which level you're prioritizing. If you are defining a roadmap or a strategy for the full year, my recommendation is to start higher up, because you don't know which solution you're going to ship in Q3 if you're starting Q1. And so it will not make sense to already define which solution you're prioritizing. And for this one, it will allow us to prioritize the customer jobs at higher level so that you can have a good understanding of which one you want to tackle. How you prioritize the customer jobs? In multiple ways. So the first one is having a clear prioritization matrix. And a prioritization matrix, it depends on different companies. So different company might optimize different metrics. They might be optimizing customer satisfaction, or they might optimizing revenues. They might use different dimensions at a given point of time. But again, prioritization, I think, should not be one-off. And so by mapping out all the opportunities, once you do the first prioritization, and you do it as data informed as possible, throughout the year, you can run experiments that validate your assumptions for the following cycle to better prioritize the next customer jobs. And so if you feel that based on your prioritization metrics, based on your qualitative and quantitative insights, you're prioritizing the first 3 customer jobs as your next high-level roadmap, then throughout the year, the ones that were left aside, they can be tested. We have a playbook for that. They can be tested high level. For example, creating some smoke test or fake door test, or running interviews, running surveys, and you try to validate high level whether managing cost, for example, for an hotelier is as important as managing their staff. Now, today, we know that managing their staff is key. We have insights from sales that is blocking today deals. And so doing that will unlock some deals. We don't have much information around managing the cost. But once we get to the next cycle, potentially we can start already getting information on that, running experiments at different levels. So it's more like a strategic discovery that you run to understand high level whether from a business point of view, your customer sees that as a big pain point for them. And so depending on that, implementing different techniques of our playbook.
That makes a lot of sense. I'm just to clarify, so you will have, from Amenitiz perspective, some sort of, I would call it non-sales metric, for lack of a better word, so sort of metric that you are optimizing for. And then you will analyze the potential impact you are expecting on each of these opportunities. So the right framing, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yes.
So on one side, you have a matrix, and then on the other side, you want to keep iterating, or you want to add more data-informed decision to your matrix so that in the following prioritization cycle, you have more information.
What about the typical conflicts of, I use some examples like, the CFO wants to be more on the let's generate money side, and the marketing manager may be more on the let's growth side. So both may be right in terms of the opportunity having impact, but how do you put that in the balance? How you navigate those trade-offs?
Well, essentially, we try to create as many dimensions as possible that reflect the priority of the business. And so typically for the high-level customer jobs, we might have, the financial impact, the user impact, the reach of your customer, the overall business confidence of that. Is it a high-risk bet? Is it a low-risk bet? How much we know? How much are we organized for that? And maybe also like a complexity, which is not a technical complexity because we have not got down to the solution level. It's more like an organizational complexity. Is it something we know that we do, or is something that completely unknown? And so you might have some t-shirt sizing estimation backed up with data that you can understand and then align. The more data-driven you are, the more informed decision you make. The less data-driven you are, the more consensus and discussions you need to create in order to make sure that each person can add the piece of information, qualitative, quantitative, to the discussion.
Yeah, perfect. That makes a lot of sense. So in between the lines, you mentioned a playbook that we uncovered in our first conversation that I was really interested about. So can you tell us a bit more about it? So how does it play? What role does it play in this strategy, and what is the playbook about?
Yeah, absolutely. One of the problems we're trying to solve was essentially, how do we define our methodologies depending on the situation in which the business is and depending on what we're trying to solve. And spending 3 months running a discovery or spending 2 weeks to run a discovery might be right or wrong depending on the situation in which you are. So there's no one simple solution to that. There's no one simple answer. And so essentially what we tried to define was, starting from the strategies that we were going towards, we classified it in 3 main options. So we are starting from the new opportunities. So the new opportunities essentially are new bets that the business doesn't really know much, and from which we want to start from understanding the market, understanding the competitors, understanding the landscape. They're risky bets, very costly for the company. And so you want to go from a strategic discovery down towards a full cycle of product development, because it's very risky, very costly. And so you want to make sure that your investment is sound before investing on that. But you can't do that every single time, because otherwise your velocity is simply not working. And so in some other cases, you have the objective that is clear. You have a clear objective, you're optimizing a specific metric. And so the second strategy that we're implementing is the core development. And essentially is, once the strategy is clear and the objective is clear, we go through a process of discovery, delivery, and analysis until we reach the desired objective. And essentially, this is most of our core activities, and it happens within a specific cycle. So typically, the second one is the quarterly cadence, where you have your OKRs as objective, you define the strategy, and you keep repeating that. The first one, it might be a couple of times per year, depending on the team more. If it's a new team, an expansion team, probably it's more, and it's something that it requires longer cycles. But there are some moments in which you need to go for fast optimizations. And so you don't have time to run weeks of discovery. You don't have time to run weeks of delivery. You just need to take short-term bets. And so while in the second one, you learn to build, in the third one, you build to learn. And so you deliver the product in production, your users are excited, but it's not exactly what they wanted. Yeah. Which is often the case. And so you just need to take fast bets to show them that the product is iterating. You're still learning, but you're learning from a different way. You're learning from their usages. And so by learning from their usages, you can iterate very fastly on the product. We recently launched a new product a couple of months ago, and we went through weekly iteration up to the point where we could see week over week the adoption increasing. And that was a good sign because it meant that we learned how they were using it, what was blocking them from using it, and eventually iterating on that. And so depending on what we're testing, whether we are, testing our assumptions at customer jobs level, we might go with the first level of the playbook that has 6 different sections. If we are throughout the cycle and we're trying to tackle a user job, so for example, a more specific action to allow the user to solve a specific tasks, maybe it's more about the core development, and we try to reduce it to 3 macro phases. And if we shipped already a product, and so we are more at the solution stage, we try to go very fast and implement the third strategy, which is the fast optimization. Now, for each level, essentially what we created is a toolbox where we have our preferred methodologies. That can go from, running job to be done interviews, analyzing the deal lost, or creating a risk analysis or a business plan if we are at the objective stage definition, or for problem identification stage, for example, the most used methods could be user survey, reading the support tickets, running user interviews. So let's say based on our situation, we created our toolbox for each of those phases that will work the best in our environment. Yeah. Which means that all the newcomers as well don't need to reinvent the wheel. They know what works the best. They can iterate on that. They can add their knowledge, but at the same time, we're all on the same page. And especially at the beginning, when we decide, are we going for fast optimization or are we going for our core development? There won't be any frustration and frictions between product managers, designers, and engineers on how much time we spend on each activity, because we reached a high-level alignment and agreement on, given this situation, we need to go fast, we need to learn while building, while in other moments, we are testing our assumptions and we need to be more careful and eventually test our assumptions before building anything.
Yeah. That makes a lot of sense. I have a lot of questions now. I will start with the first one, how this plays with the things we mentioned before about your framework for strategy. So I'm not sure if we completed that exercise, but we reached into the point that we say, hey, this is our areas of investment. So for these areas of investment, will you define the way in which you, or which of the 3 items of the playbook you will use?
Yeah, typically when you're exploring a new customer job, so it's a new area, very different from your business activity, you might go for the first strategy. You're exploring a new opportunity. It's very costly for the company. You know very little about it. It might be very beneficial, but you need to build a vision, a product vision, before actually building anything, before defining any objective, because you don't even know whether maybe it's very valuable for the customer, but it's not valuable for the business. And so you got to understand what would be the relationship between the value you deliver and the value you capture. Yeah. Once you already prioritize an area, and so the customer job is clear, and you are understanding how the receptionists work, for example, in our case, and you are understanding how they're using your product, there you are more into the second strategy, which is your core development. You're running a user discovery, you're delivering different solutions for them to solve their problems, and eventually you're analyzing your results.
Yeah.
And when you are at the solution stage, it's where you're probably experimenting. And so the customer job is clear. It's clear what the user needs to get done. The solution is not clear yet. You shipped one, but maybe it's not the right one because you're not achieving the right level of adoption, the right level of satisfaction. And so you need to keep iterating on that. Yeah. And your understanding on the customer was more or less clear. So getting back to discovery might make sense depending on the risk. But in our situation that we are in a high-paced environment, fast-paced environment, it makes more sense to iterate faster and build different options, iterate on the product with fast bets in order to reach the desired outcome.
But when you're defining the strategy, you already know in which stage this kind of area of opportunities is, because I assume that you will have, by the strategy, the definition or the selection of the strategy, you say, hey, I want to invest in this new area. This is a new area of growth, kind of super uncertain, super high bet. And I have this area, which is a very fundamental core part of our business, but needs to be optimized. So do you have this understanding of the area of the strategy plus the level of the playbook you are playing in?
That's the prerequisite. That's the understanding that needs to happen at all level, in the sense that once you define the strategy is not enough unless you align everyone in what does it mean to go after. Yeah. Exactly. So aligning, getting the buy-in from the different stakeholders, saying, this is going to be the focus. There is the 3 horizon strategy framework, which is quite popular, especially in consulting. You have.
I was going to ask about that because it resembles what you mentioned. Yeah.
Exactly. Sorry. So you might need to have different time box activity or resource allotment on the first bucket, which is improving your existing product. And so this is what you prioritize. That it works well, and you need to improve your existing product. And you might want to allocate 70% of your time. And then 20% of your time is on transforming. And so transforming are maybe the customer jobs that are related to your business, but you don't really know about it. Maybe you're already validated, but the user job is not very clear. And so you're trying to transform that. And then you have the innovative part. And the innovative part is where you have no clue. You're trying to find out something completely different that could transform your business entirely, but you're not sure about, and you might want to invest only 10%. And so this should be an agreement at all levels.
And by the way, in Amenitiz concretely, are you using this thinking of let's balance the portfolio of areas of investment?
Yes, we are, and the agreement on how much time we invest on one or the other, and classifying the different opportunities based on whether they are improving, transforming, or innovating the business. It's something that we agree at leadership level. And if we see that we are investing too much on one category or the other, and we see it's not the right moment based on the business phase, then we try to rebalance the investment.
Super nice. That's super clever. Going back to I just realized I missed one part of my first part of the interview. So you select the areas of investment. Where do you put those? Is there a document, or what the strategy lives after you select the areas of investment? Is some artifact out there?
Yeah, so we essentially ideate for the first time, let's say, where it's a bit scrappy and you're trying to just put all the information together in Miro. It's easier, especially with hybrid teams, partially working on site, partially remote. It's easier to create frameworks to move things around. So that's the first piece of artifact that we create. Then for sharing and for aligning, nowadays Google Slides seems to be the one that are working the most. But then for the run mode, for gathering insights, we are creating the same structure in ProductBoard. ProductBoard is the tool that we use on our side. And so we create the very same structure in ProductBoard. We're creating the same structure in HubSpot and Zendesk, so that essentially every insights that we get from customer-facing teams are following the same structure. And so eventually for the run mode, when throughout the quarter, throughout the year, we're changing the strategy because it's not immutable. So it's changing. that tool is much more flexible to share information. And so when we have conversation, normally we use directly a product board or similar tools that you may use in different other companies. And once you need to have maybe higher level conversation, or you just want to structure it in a different way, for example, if you need to present that to the investors, you move that into a slide. But the structure and the mental framework is there, and so it's much easier then to discuss, align. Exactly.
Yeah, perfect. Actually, I mean, this goes to one of my the questions I have in mind is what are the tools to kind of make sure that people is connecting that mission vision that we talked at the beginning with the actions they are doing. But I guess that if it's just those structures are living in the tools they are using day to day, that makes it a bit sounds like super natural to be always kind of knowing the link, right?
Exactly. It should be easier. It should be easier that way, right? Like you need to create habits. If you don't create habits, then the adoption that you will have will be much lower than what you could have. And so if you're not using the tools you're using on a daily basis, it might be more complicated to remember that you need to update a slide or update a Miro board among the millions of those that you built.
Exactly. Yeah, actually, that's one of the problems, right? If you are having disconnected tools, once you are updating something here, then the other ones already become obsolete. So it's
I think the first one should be facilitating, while the latter one, so product board or whatever product tool you use, should be the ones where eventually the knowledge stays and gets iterated.
Yeah, it's like that. So the workshop tool versus the communication / knowledge base, which is kind of the work to do.
Correct.
Afterwards. Yeah, very good, very good. Yeah, we cover everything I have, so I think this has been super insightful. But I will ask my very usual closing question. It is what I'm not asking. So, what's some learning you had around strategy and strategy creation that we didn't maybe touch so far?
Yeah, that's interesting. I guess what we maybe have not discussed was how you actually get the buy-in from the key stakeholders. We probably created the basis for that, but then the mechanics of that is much more complex, and you might implement different strategies depending on the different stage of the company, whether you're a seed company, Series A, B, corporate. You might have different techniques to make sure that you get completely buy-in from different departments, because you might have the best strategy in the world, but if you don't get alignment, if you don't get buy-in, you don't make sure that other departments are aligning with your objectives, are aligning with your strategy, then it might be more difficult to execute.
And by the way, do you have an example there? Because I mean, I totally see what you're meaning, but making it more actionable. What's some example of I don't know, one situation in which you may use one technique or another strategy? So do you have something I know? No, doesn't need to be recent if it's too secretive, but if you have some example, maybe a bit more clear.
Yeah, I mean, for example, when I was at Payfit, we went from 250 people to 600, 700 in my last year there. And essentially, the year when we planned we were 250 was very different when we planned when we were 600. Mm-hmm. We were based in different countries. We had different strategy at global and local level. We had different leaders. The level of maturity of the company had increased as well. And so you had people playing strategy much more than at the early stage. And so you needed more people in the room, because while the product strategies maybe were the best one in their fields, you had business strategies, marketing strategies that could also bring lots of knowledge on the product from different angles and bring insights that maybe based on the context to which you were exposed to, you could not bring. And so there, essentially, we implemented different processes where, the discussion needs to happen at different levels. So you start sharing top-down few information, then bottom-up, you start to create a strategy, and then you have different discussions that happens at different levels until you reach an agreement. And so the time span in which you define the strategy moves from 1 week to actually 3 months. You get to the same point eventually, but the discussions are multiple and require much more time if you want to make sure that everyone is aligned. If it takes 1 week, you won't have time to reach that alignment. You will get frustration and eventually potentially create misalignment. And so I guess the more the company grows, the more strategists are involved into the discussions, the more alignment needs to happen, the more discussion top down, briefing and debriefing needs to happen back and forth, because it's not unidirectional, is a series of back and forth that needs to happen based on different inputs and insights until we reach the desired outcome, which is in the end the same that everyone wants to pursue, have the biggest impact.
What's interesting about that is that not only at least in my experience, and maybe I want to formulate this question, but not only the time and the level of conversations you need to have, but also the strength of your data, because you will have more questions from more people with, as you said, with more knowledge or even different interests. So you need to your data need to be more robust to prove it. So do you have any insight on that, or or how you have been using it now with Amenitiz or some other companies?
Yeah, absolutely. I think using both qualitative and quantitative data is key to prove your assumptions. Otherwise, you will just enter into an opinion-based discussion, which, I mean, it still works because people have experience, but it's very biased, and so then the productivity of those discussions probably will decrease. And so I've been in both discussions where very biased discussion happened, and I've been in very productive discussion where information were available. And so one way for me to have those information available is to build that system that allows you to collect information day after day and not just collect them a week before that meeting that you need to have with your team. Because if you do that, very often it will be the result of the previous week's collection of data. While if you do it recurringly with a system, you probably have more chances to have a less biased result.
Exactly. The recency bias has a strong thing to say in those situations.
Yeah.
Okay, then that has been super, super interesting. So maybe I should close with my usual rapid fire questions. And I have 2 in mind for you. The first one is, what's your favorite interview question for product manager when you're hiring?
Oh, interesting. Normally, to a product manager, I ask, how do you identify the right product for the right targeted audience? So what's your approach?
Perfect. Interesting. Then the second rapid fire question will be, what is your one of the unusual book recommendations you do for product managers? So not inspired, but something different that you will usually recommend.
That's an interesting one. I think the one I liked, particularly in my early stage of my career, was The Art of Action. Is a book that is, I don't know if you had the chance to read it, but it's a book, it's a business book inspired from some Prussian generals that were implementing different techniques in order to make sure that their teams were empowered and could take decisions without necessarily have a chain of command and control, and being briefed at every single moment with a clear purpose, a clear direction, because everyone knew at every single stage what was the reason they were doing what they were doing and why.
Yeah, I think it connects to what we have been discussing, aligning the vision with the actions.
That's correct.
Very nice. So, Alessandro, it has been a total pleasure. I think your answers and your process has been super insightful. So, thanks for being so open and sharing it. Anything else you want to say to the audience, where they can find you, or any message you have for them?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I'm always available. If anyone is interested to have a chat, feel free to reach out, and I'll be happy to have a product conversation. And thanks you for inviting me. Bye.
I hope you enjoyed this episode of 100 Product Strategies, the podcast by Product Direction. You can also follow us on Twitter, LinkedIn, or Instagram to get access to free weekly content that helps product people upgrade their skills and become more successful. You can access more material, promotional trainings, and be notified of every episode of the show with Product Direction's weekly newsletter. Join thousands of product leaders by registering in productdirection.co.